Hello, everybody. Welcome to part two of this reading. Today, we're going to be in Left 4 Dead. Well, specifically Gary's mod. Um, so I just picked a nice little spot that really sets the mood instead of the Wings of Dawn. But again, the Wings of Dawn is a dragon game. You can go on to Steam, check out their Discord, YouTube, everything in the previous video. You can just go look it there. And the previous video also had the little cryptid squonk and stuff. So, though it's still a little rough, but we're going to continue reading this today. Let me actually check if it's recording because I would feel bad if it wasn't. Okay, it is recording. Okay, perfect. So, we're continuing on with the SCP stuff. T34-DE2-04F. Retrieval. Subject was found in sector blank blank. A highly. Oh no, we already read that. We can ignore that, guys. Don't worry about it. CSZ, sorry, CZE 582 7DG, retrieval, uneventful. Description: subject appeared in the bedroom of a suburban home. Several people. We already read that one. Oh, here we go. A99 L35 33D, retrieval. SCP-507 was found in Dr. King's office. Description: subject appeared in what seemed to be an endless forest of apple trees. It was inhabited by a race of humanoids, all of whom appeared identical to Dr. King. The entities seemed to recognize SCP-507 and gave him a message to pass on to Dr. King. Come home, lost child. We have sent you the signs countless times, and yet still you do not come. Do you not remember the holy orchard of your birth, the wind through the trees, the crisp delight of her holy fruit? Please come home. We miss you. Request to pass a message on to Dr. King. Denied. For the safety of SCP-507. SCP-LD9-431. Retrieval. Uneventful. Subject appeared in a highly furnished version of its containment chamber. After leaving the chamber, it discovered that the facility was inverted from the main reality in the sense that all the offices were replaced with containment chambers and vice versa. Further inquiry revealed that the Foundation staff were being contained to their ability to create dangerous experiments. The primary containment staff consisted of more docile versions of the baseline reality's humanoids in containment. Notably, less hostile did not make their lack of containment any safer, causing the facility to be filled with biological, mimetic, and other hazards. It is unknown how a K-class scenario has not occurred despite the apparent lack of containment. D-class and non-research staff were unchanged. Requests heightened heightened psychological evaluations on staff. Redacted. I swear you guys aren't telling us something about 507. It didn't bring anything dangerous back somehow, and never does. Not to mention it was in a mental institution and aspires to be a researcher. Ancient McDaniels. WQK 112 994. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject appeared in the middle of a large, dense forest. The forest showed no signs of life beyond plant life, including insects or animals. Subject attempted to leave forest on foot, but despite traveling for over 3 weeks on foot, subject was unable to locate an end to the forest. Subject was forced to scavenge edible seeming nuts and fruit in order to survive. Request that enough non-perishable rations to last a week be added to its gear. Granted. CDY-745-924. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject appeared in a world entirely made of candy. It described it as Willy Wonka's factory, but on steroids. Upon reappearing, subject appeared to have gained 6.8 kilograms, 15 pounds. Requests more candy. Denied. 12N-U677-22F. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject arrived in an urban area in a reality which appeared at first to be modern day Japan. Subject figured out that it had not left the Western Hemisphere through attempts to gather information, including successfully accessing the internet on a tablet computer it found in an internet cafe. Subject spent several days without an issue in the alternate reality before shifting back. Based on subject's research and limited conversations with locals, it figured that the point of divergence from our universe was that Japanese sailors discovered a way to America in the 14th century. As a result, America's west coast was colonized by the Japanese, and the influx of food and natural resources to Japan resulted in Japan's dominance first in Asia, then globally. The Japanese Empire and European powers apparently waged several wars in America and Western Asia. The most recent war with the British Empire in 1932 resulted in a Cold War that lasted until Britain's bankruptcy and the independence of its overseas territories in 1977. Request: none. 92P-152-92FJ. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject appeared in redacted, with several lacerations covering its left side and arm. Description: subject appeared in a pitch black space with lights floating at head level. Closer examination of these lights revealed them to be a type of fruit hanging from trees with black bark. The flashlight was noted as being less effective than before. A distant light moved steadily towards the subject. Upon closer inspection of the light, subject reported it to be a humanoid figure glowing brightly. The entity was non-hostile and preferred to follow subject. After 2 hours, the entity left the vicinity of subject and disappeared amongst the strange fruit. Subject noted heavy breathing approximately 1 hour after the entity's departure. Subject used the flashlight to illuminate the source of breathing, which proved to be a pitch black entity, making it almost invisible in the dark. Subject fled from the entity, which gave chase and attacked subject, causing lacerations down subject's left side. Request: medical attention and a stronger flashlight. Approved. HYO-772-939. Retrieval. Subject appeared in his quarters bleeding from eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Subject remained in a coma in Medical Bay C for 42 days after returning. During this time, subject did not shift or change position at all. Description: subject recalled appearing in a shifting white landscape looking upon a city made of pure light. The buildings of the city were built into impossible shapes and forms that rendered subject incapable of describing it in any detail. Out of the city came two massive beings who approached the subject. The very presence of these beings, presumably the inhabitants of the city, caused extreme pain and rapid blindness in the subject. The beings attempted to speak to the subject, only for the subject's eardrums to rupture under the force of their words. Subject's last reported feeling is the sense of coming undone before it blacked out. Note: despite reporting massive injuries, subject was completely uninjured when it awoke from coma. An inquiry into this is ongoing. Quest: none. HYX-324-21K9. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was discovered in redacted National Park in the back of a cave halfway up the mountain. Subject was dressed in animal skins and was clutching a crude crossbow. Description: subject was transported to a world where human beings never became the dominant species on Earth. The ruling species was a form of reptile, possibly a descendant of the larger dinosaurs. Subject was immediately apprehended upon arrival, stripped of its clothes and gear, and placed on a human reservation. These reservations were used for hunting, and remaining humans for sport. The subject was able to survive due to its higher reasoning skill and ability to hide. Subject spent the remainder of the shift hiding in the trees in order to survive the various hunting parties. Request: replacement gear granted. Now, if I remember correctly, the descendants of the megatheropods wouldn't really be smaller. I think they'd be pretty big still. Not like megatheropod size, but like Spinosaurus and T-Rex's descendants may have been at least Albertosaur sized or maybe smaller. Depends on the environmental factors. but I really don't think any of them would really hunt hominids. Humans are not a great food source, unless you're like a big cat or a bear. But like, even sharks don't like us. Sharks don't like our taste. Alligators don't really like us, but they'll still eat us. I don't know if any hunting reserves would ever happen. That being said, pretty cool. H37-U24-M13. Retrieval. SCP-507 appeared nude in basement hallway 4C, although it still had its belt, knife, and flashlight. Description: subject arrived in an environment where all artificial objects and structures were replaced with living, deformed humans. Subject conjectured that the population took turns performing various mundane jobs, along with acting as its own infrastructure and food source. Subject's clothes were stolen by other people, although it did not have to complete any jobs in its time there, about 7 days. Request to not have to see any people does not need to for a few weeks. Granted for 3 weeks. Retrieval. G31-E20-E. I-14. Not E14, I-14. Retrieval. Found approximately 120 kilometers away from original location. Description: subject appeared in a dimension made of varying forms of gelatin. The area appeared to be a flat plain stretching to the horizon with occasional small hills about 20 kilometers apart. The subject traveled for about a day before climbing a hill and noticing a metal object glinting in the distance. The subject continued to travel for several days, occasionally sipping from puddles of liquid gelatin or sleeping, and was still several kilometers away from the metal object before returning to our dimension. Quest: subject refused to consume soft foods for nearly a month. It does not specify if it was granted or not. S33-4G3-BG4. Retrieval. Appeared about 15 feet above the ground in the site cafeteria. Description: subject appeared in a large basketball court, which was occupied by 6 individuals playing basketball. This group included 2 humans, 2 trilaterally symmetrical insectoid beings, 1 squid-like organism with a sharp, rough brown skin, and 1 hovering yellow spherical being with 8 triple-jointed arms. Subject asked where he was and was told he was in an all-species sports center. Subject then checked several rooms with various games, most of them unknown and several unplayable by humans, before taken to a locked room by 2 creatures wearing orange and pink uniforms. When the subject asked why he was brought here, one of the creatures claimed that he was being held until closing time for sneaking into the sports center. Subject stayed there for about 7 hours before shifting back. Requests? None. A10ER5436. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject arrived in a dimension where everything was frozen in place as it was on December 24th, 2012. According to computers found there. Subject found it easy to find food and water, but noted the sky was red and pink and displayed a message reading error 14528. Loading time expected 228 to 342 years. Subject spent nearly 2 months there before shifting back. Requests? None. AQL-58H-99M. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject appeared in Redacted, Idaho. Description: subject appeared in a dimension where the average human lifespan was around 24 hours. Despite the short lifespan, citizens would still obtain jobs and marry, except at an accelerated pace. Subject personally witnessed a couple meet, get married, and have 2 children within the span of 3 hours. Subject remained in this dimension for 2 months. Because of his normal lifespan, he witnessed several generations live and became internationally famous as the person who doesn't die. Subject reported that it was treated as a wise elder and consulted for advice on world events. Requests? None. JDP-H0V-KRZ. Retrieval. Appeared in a janitorial closet in the site basement. Description: subject appeared 2 meters above the stands in a very large indoor sports arena of approximately 4 kilometers in length and half a kilometer in height. At the center of the arena were 4 teams wearing orange, yellow, pink, and purple body armor and fatigues, respectively, engaged in combat. Each team possessed 4 members, armed with 2 anti-tank rocket launchers, 4 assault rifles, and 1 tank. Subject was unable to ascertain the approximate amount of people watching the event, but he claimed every seat was full. After 3 minutes, subject was apprehended by 2 guards and escorted to his cell. When subject asked why he was being held, a guard responded, "You have disrupted the daily games and will be held as a player for a future game." Subject was allowed to watch the games on an old-fashioned television in his cell and learned that all games are controlled by someone called the Master 024, who regularly interrupted with rule changes. During the 3rd game, the subject watched several researchers wearing outfits bearing an altered Foundation logo were forced to play in obstacle courses. Subject returned after approximately 36 hours. Requests: access to the site gym in case of similar circumstances. Denied on the grounds that 507 revisiting this dimension in the future is unlikely, and it would not offer a substantially higher chance of winning. That's a good point. A lot of them have rocket launchers and tanks. That is quite the achievement. Now, those of you curious, and my voice is going away a little bit. For those of you curious, I am actually halfway through this document. And this isn't even the last one. There's another one after this. As you can tell, I am not specifically great at this, but that's okay. I'm having a lot of fun reading this so far. But, I think I'll continue on. 486-78V-FG9 retrieval. Subject was found in the on-site break room with what at first appeared to be a series of deep gashes running down the subject's right cheek, neck, and shoulder. Subject informs that the gashes are actually stage makeup. Description: the subject appeared in an site break room, appearing identical to the one of his retrievals at first glance. Researcher redacted and Doctor redacted had been talking about nothing in particular. Equipment seen on a television show set production present, along with men in uniforms resembling those of a TV show set worker uniform, managing the equipment. Upon taking a closer look, the subject realized the break room was actually just a set for a television or movie. The 2 doctors replied to the subject's sudden appearance by expressing surprise at his entrance, but for the reason that the subject's shift back to our reality scene wasn't for another 10 minutes. Doctor redacted also informed the subject that he needed to stop by the makeup department. Subject notes that after researcher redacted, then tells the man managing the equipment to start the scene over from the top. The subject had just returned from the makeup department back to the apparent set when it shifted into our reality. Requests: none. 3LE-4NN-0UT. Retrieval. Subject was found approximately 20 kilometers from the site. Description: subject appeared in what first was thought by subject to be a forest. Subject quickly determined that the forest was a concrete heptagonal tunnel lit by an unknown brand of blue fluorescent lamp, with each side approximately 8 meters long. Subject then discovered that the tunnel contained an incredibly diverse amount of plants, containing many that do not naturally grow even on the same continent. Subject soon found the phrase O43 warning written in yellow spray paint exactly every 100 meters, with an abnormally large bloody handprint on the wall near each message. Subject attempted to find an end to the tunnel, eating many of the recognizable plant species he could find, but did not reach the end. Subject shifted back after 6 days. Requests: none. TE2-001-AN9. Retrieval. Subject fell approximately 9 meters to the site's roof and broke his leg. Subject is currently healing in the site infirmary. Description: subject woke up in a dark room with a clock displaying the time and date as 07:33:84. 3120 GAN 01. Subject quickly found a staircase and ascended 8 levels of stairs before reaching what the subject described as an airplane control room. How interesting. Overlooking a destroyed airfield with several dozen stone statues standing in various poses outside. After the subject blinked, it was noticed that almost every visible statue had moved. Subject spent the remaining 4 days of the shift hiding in the stairwell with his flashlight, attempting to read magazines and flight manuals in an unknown language. Subject noted no people during this shift, but claims to have heard explosions in the distance 3 days into the shift. Requests none. Retrieval of WK6-927-DH7. Subject was retrieved in a large blue dog costume, with large patches anomalously fused to the subject's skin. The costume was removable, but large portions of the subject's skin had to be taken off, prompting a skin graft. Ugh. Description. Subject arrived in a building exactly like the Foundation site, redacted, excluding that all staff seemed to be wearing anthropomorphic animal costumes. The staff quickly tried to corner the subject, talking about something called being furred. The subject escaped and ran off in a different direction, but due to its broken leg sustained during the last shift, was caught by a different staff member, who then put a large blue dog costume on the subject, who then found large amounts of pain and then shifted back. Request a thin skin suit. Granted. Retrieval uneventful of 930-MSI-R1C. Description. Subject appeared in an alternate Foundation site where everything was a shade of red, including all living organisms. Subject was contained, designated as an anomalous object due to his strange appearance. Subject was contained for about 20 hours before shifting back. Request a green blanket instead of its current red blanket. Granted. We're over halfway there. I'm going to be taking a quick break. I will be right back, fellas. We are back. Can you believe it? I just got some more water. I went to the restroom, all that good stuff. So, let's see where we were. Here we are. M7E-F52-198. Retrieval uneventful. Description. Subject appeared in a featureless white room containing nothing but the subject and the late 41st President of the United States, George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush proceeded to produce wet broccoli from an unknown location and continually throw it at the subject while repeatedly saying 1992. Requests none. 2Q2-W1E-R18. Getting a little more comfortable there, guys. Sorry about that. Taking a quick drink of water. This is your water break for the video. Retrieval uneventful. Description. Subject appeared in a room with entirely black walls, ceiling, and floor. After the subject got its bearings, it attempted to knock on several walls. After knocking a few times, the subject noticed a humanoid entity standing in the corner. Said entity was wearing a standard Foundation D-class uniform and appeared human from the neck down, but the entity's head was that of a domestic house cat, complete with fur and whiskers. The entity then proceeded to hit 507 in the stomach with a baseball bat it had been holding. When asked why it did this, the entity responded, "You know damn well, punk. Don't leave." The entity then walked through one of the room's walls. Subject spent the remainder of its shift unsuccessfully attempting to break out of the room. Requests none. Subject's bruised abdomen taken care of. 493-SPA-4D8. Retrieval. Subject was recovered 17 kilometers away, riding to the site with a recovered bicycle-like vehicle. See below. Description. Subject woke up in a field near a farmhouse and a barn. The subject went to the farmhouse to attempt to find signs of life and was greeted by an elderly Caucasian man and the man's family. The man was able to somewhat communicate with the subject using a book that the subject later identified to be a Spanish to English dictionary. The subject gave a cover story of having developed partial amnesia and managed to find that he was in a country that had rebelled from the prominent Spanish Empire. The subject was given a ride to a nearby town and some money and spent most of the remainder of its shift in the town's public library using an advanced computer system that offered English as a language. The subject managed to find a vehicle resembling a bicycle in a trash can and was riding said vehicle when it shifted back to our reality. Of covered items. One vehicle resembling a bicycle but with 3 wheels in a row, a seat with a backrest, and a broken brake system. Several paper bills printed with purple ink depicting various unknown individuals and Spanish phrases. Requests? None. 952-7YD-ABBA. Retrieval. Subject appeared in the medical wing of site redacted. In redacted. Screaming and wildly swinging a chair. Description. Subject appeared in the maternity ward of a large hospital. Subject was discovered by being dressed as a nurse checking on the infants. Subject was unable to describe the appearance of the nurse as it began screaming every time it tried. The creature spoke to the subject in a pleasant voice that it had been upsetting the other patients with its strange appearance and that it was time to start the operation. The nurse then pounced on the subject and wrapped him in a straitjacket before wheeling him into an operation room. When the straitjacket was removed, subject jumped off the table and attempted to fend off the creatures when it shifted back. Retrieved items. 1 chair. It appears to be a normal office chair, but further tests must be performed. Requests? A memory wipe. Denied. QAZ-568-PLM. Retrieved via tracker. Subject found unconscious several hundred meters from the site, lying on the ground with various burns on its chest and face. Subject was determined to be under the effect of a high-grade sleeping medication, which wore off 9 hours later. Description. Subject is incapable of remembering anything that occurred within the 25-hour duration of the shift. Attempting to remember this results in the subject rapidly losing consciousness and bleeding from various orifices. Giving the subject Class W amnestics had no effect. Retrieved items. A blue bathrobe, worn by the subject upon return. Request replacement tools. Granted. BE4-5YH-009. Retrieval. Subject found in a locked storage freezer next to the cafeteria. Subject released from the freezer. Description. Subject shifted to a near identical version of its containment chamber with a male skeleton wearing 507's jumpsuit and utility belt nearby on the floor. After this, the subject found a loaded pistol nearby on the floor and used it to shatter the window to the observation room overlooking the containment chamber. This resulted in a deluge of water flooding into the room and the subject losing consciousness. Subject then awoke wearing a diving suit in a dark room with nearly waist-high water and several crates of scattered around. Subject spent the next several minutes attempting to leave the room but found all the doors were locked. After waiting several more hours, a trapdoor in the floor opened and 3 humanoid creatures with fish-like skin emerged. One of the creatures offered subject several dozen wet pieces of seaweed and various meats. Following this, all 3 vocalized, "Don't smile back. Smiles hide lies. Stay here." And using this then, before leaving through the trapdoor. Subject spent the next several days in the room not wearing the diving suit. One of the creatures returned briefly after 2 days to remove several rusty medieval weapons from one of the crates. The creature did not vocalize anything during this time, but hummed an unknown song. Following the departure of the creature, subject attempted to find what was in the various crates. Found several items, including bags of microwave popcorn, laundry, toy kaleidoscopes, and various machine parts. However, upon opening a crate labeled G-4567-A2, subject found a corpse highly resembling, but not perfectly matching, the smiling man encountered on previous trips. Subject spent the remainder of the shift avoiding that part of the room. Retrieved items. A November 1996 Boys Life magazine issue found in a crate. The magazine has not been found to contain any differences from the baseline issue beyond the word choice in certain articles. Requests. A warm blanket. Granted. SKS-45K-923. Retrieval. Via tracker. Subject was found buried in a grave in Redacted, Indiana. Description. Subject spent the entire shift free falling through the air as if it had jumped from a plane. During the entire shift, subject was unable to see any kind of solid ground, only more sky. The only more noticeable feature, according to the subject, were immense birds in the distance. Requests? None. TR3-APP-6ED. Retrieval. Subject appeared in its chamber, hyperventilating, and collapsed to the floor. Description. Subject manifested within a cramped crawl space between two walls, unable to move. Subject attempted to call for help, but heard no noises beyond a dripping noise and an unknown creature scurrying nearby on 2 occasions. Subject shifted back after approximately 24 hours. Requests? None. 773-URC-332. Retrieval uneventful. Description. Subject manifested in a large auditorium containing an estimate of 50,000 identical 507 objects. Objects seem to be having an analog to a political rally advocating for the overthrow of the government under the organization name of the People's Dimension Hopper Republic. Within 2 weeks of the duration of the subject shift, the PDHR overthrew the United States government, establishing their own government in the form of a republic entirely composed of 507 objects. Subject was elected to the office of Representative of Massachusetts and was about to introduce its first piece of legislation when subject shifted back to prime reality. Requests? None. 812-BCF-121. Retrieval. Subject reappeared within its containment chamber without its hung gun or knife. Description. Subject manifested in a train-like vehicle. Upon manifesting, it noticed several other individuals seated at various locations along the carriage, who did not remark upon his sudden appearance. The subject noted that the train appeared to be in some kind of black void with nothing visible out the windows. After 30 minutes, a humanoid creature without facial features spotted the subject and asked him for his ticket. Upon the subject reporting his lack of tickets, he was searched and his weapons were confiscated. The subject was told they would have to leave the train at the next stop, and they would be fined 10 minutes. And the subject began to explore the train, but shifted back after walking approximately 3 kilometers and finding no end. Requests? Replacement gear. Granted. 5H4-2KP-NCH. Retrieval. Subject appeared in its containment with multiple deep bite wounds on the forearms. Description. Subject arrived in a facility identical to site redacted. Intercom warning stated that if SCP-507 has stated that SPC-507 has displaced. Spotted the subject is to be punched immediately and returned to containment. Subject reported fearing for his safety until the alternate Dr. Redacted entered its containment to reassure it that it was not the one to be punched back into this world. Subject stayed in containment for 3 hours before a expletive huge shark materialized in containment with it and proceeded to attack the subject. 2 guard personnel entered the subject's containment and proceeded to punch the shark in its stupid shark face multiple times. Requests? Shark repellent. Denied on the grounds that site redacted has no non-anomalous shark repellent. 5L3-33P-IN6. Retrieval. Subject reappeared in its containment chamber, asleep. Description. Unknown. Subject claims to have slept through the entire shift. Requests a wristwatch that will detect when it has shifted and sound an alarm to wake it up if it is sleeping at the time by detecting the absence of signal pings from the site. Granted. Watch currently in development. D0N-T8L-1NK. Retrieval. Subject reappeared exactly where it disappeared, from its seat in the site cafeteria. A fraction of a second later, subject did not realize he had shifted until informed of such by Agent M. Redacted, with whom it had been speaking at the time. Description unknown. Duration of shift is estimated to be fewer than 100 milliseconds. As it occurred while SCP-507 was blinking, subject was not able to visually observe destination universe before the shift ended. Requests? None. 5F8-13I-BBO. Retrieval. Subject appeared in the employee break room, seeming to repeatedly mutter phrases described as being about laundry detergent. Subject recovered after 5 minutes, though it proceeded to talk primarily about a non-existent product named Reality Cleaning Laundry Detergent for an additional 30 minutes. Subject vocalized the inclusion of the hyphen. So Reality hyphen Cleaning Laundry Detergent. It's cool water right there. Description. Subject appeared in the middle of an empty highway and immediately went to the side of the road, beginning to walk towards a city in the distance. Upon arrival, subject noted that, while there were few pedestrians outside, some electronic devices were still active. Most notable which were a variety of retro television sets throughout the sidewalks and roads. Any pedestrians that were outside sat or lay on the ground watching said television sets. Subject then sat down in front of one of the sets and saw an ad for Reality hyphen Cleaning Laundry Detergent. Reported advertisement used a substantial amount of Christian imagery. Subject shifted back after 53 minutes, unable to recall any other programming that wasn't an advertisement. Requests multiple cases of Reality hyphen Cleaning Laundry Detergent. Multiple researchers have suggested the subject should go through cognitohazard training in order to prevent further damage to its mental state. Proposal is pending O5 approval. 168-PRK-111. Retrieval. Subject appeared unconscious within a temporarily unoccupied containment chamber within a highly classified portion of the site, but required no end. Yes. Sorry. A little tough word there. Okay, so I'm sure I'm going to butcher this word, and I apologize thoroughly, but it's like anesthetization. If you know how that's pronounced, actually, I'll Google it after this. I'm sure Google will tell me. Hopefully, it doesn't tell me with that AI, because fuck AI. Due to bodily effects sustained for a few hours following the shift. Description. Subject appeared in a hallway in a large government facility, roughly analogous to the site, but with significantly looser security. Various anomalies, such as vegetable robots and a lion in a toga, were observed walking around the building and even fraternizing with guards and researchers. And subject was gifted a soft woolen robe upon first being noticed by staff. All encountered persons proved extremely amiable and open, one being disappointed after subject attempted to end the conversation after nearly 2 hours of dialogue. Attempts to leave the facility were fruitless as no exits or maps could be found, and questioned persons were confused at and rejected the idea of reality external to the location. The total extent of this location is unknown, as subject managed to traverse a single hallway for 32 miles before abandoning the route and sleeping in a cafeteria. Food in this cafeteria consisted entirely of various meat products, but was otherwise normal. After 3 days, a high-pitched squeaking noise began emanating from a singular speaking in each room, after which all personnel and motel anomalies began calmly walking further along the hallway and discussing an action called plocking in vague and spiritual terms. After one guard briefly tripped and stopped walking, the subject was told to look away, but instead asked what it means to cloak. Upon hearing this, a humanoid with several segmented legs emerged from the facial orifices and asked how an individual could be unfamiliar with cloaking before using its non-walking legs to form a previously unknown kinetoglyphs and induce paralysis and temporarily loss of hearing, vision, and smell. Subject then attempted to apprehend the humanoid, but stumbled and fell onto a cold, rocky surface unconnected to the facility floor, felt seconds before. Subject spent remaining 10 days of shift alternating between pacing, sleeping, crying, and consuming rations. Despite a lack of auditory or visual inputs, reports hearing from his hands an avian entity having slowly and constantly approached from the distance, before landing on his head, sighing, and continuing in the opposite direction. Retrieved items. One woolen robe, determined by testing to be non-flammable and self-cleaning, left unobserved after testing, was replaced with or transmuted to 5 milliliters of Ovis Aries semen and a large black feather of indeterminate genetic makeup. Request emergency meeting with provided therapist. Granted. Gross. C4R-DB0-4RD. Retrieval. Uneventful. Description. Subject appeared in a series of tunnels that were filled with murines, ophidians, and arachnids covered in cardboard items, in the form of boxes and tubes. After 10 minutes, several humanoids covered in cardboard, around the ages of 6 to 12, appeared, repeatedly saying, "I don't want to play anymore. I'm the tunnel monster. Help me," and other similar phrases. Subject manifested back to the site as the creature started climbing on top of him. After the subject described the appearance of these monsters, they were noted to closely resemble SCP-3663. The Site-54 was contacted. Director Redacted of this site claimed that SCP-3663 was still in their tunnels. After this encounter, it is believed that there are more instances of SCP-3663 that have yet to be contained. Retrieved item. A murine covered in cardboard items. Requests. A pet cage for the recovered murine. Granted. What is a murine? I'm gonna Google what a murine is. Oh, it's a type of mouse. Yeah, it's like a little mouse. Little mouse guy. Old world rats and mice. So he gets a little pet mouse. That's cute. TNT-LUS-IC9. Retrieval. Uneventful. Description. Subject shifted while sleeping, but quickly awoke due to its new, extremely warm environment, estimated to be somewhere between 40 and 45 degrees Celsius, which I believe is in the high 90s for Fahrenheit. The location was within a subterranean tunnel and very moist, with a soft black mold covering most of the rocky surfaces. After roughly 50 meters of travel through the tunnel and making a sharp right turn, the subject entered a large hemispherical cavern with a lake roughly 200 meters diameter, containing an olive tree stretching upwards an unknown distance into a dark crevice, as well as an emaciated, unmoving humanoid perfectly resembling SCP-3048 at its center. At this point, the subject noticed that all water native to TNT-LUS-IC9 became a highly durable ice when exposed to its natural body heat, and failed to melt when removed. Further long-range inspection also revealed the humanoid to be frozen in place up to its waist, roughly 3 meters from the tree's lowest branches. After 15 minutes, the humanoid awoke and noticed the subject, beginning to loudly vocalize in an unknown Italian dialect, and gesture at the tree and the water. Subject considered a rescue attempt, but feared becoming similarly trapped in the lake and re-entered the tunnel, traveling along it for roughly 300 meters before finding himself at the same cavern. Here, the humanoid was observed attempting to smash the ice with its own skull for several seconds before recognizing the subject and hurriedly pointing towards the tree. Subject afterwards Shortly afterwards, a certifying entity at least 4 meters in height descended from the tree's hidden upper branches and urinated on the humanoid's head before retreating once more. Subject spent the remaining 8 hours of shift consuming rations, pacing, and sleeping on the edges of the cavern, and ignoring the now screaming humanoid. Retrieved items: samples of previously noted black mold. Tests proved close genetic relation to Aspergillus wenti, around 200 milliliters of anomalous water. Chemical analysis showed no difference from standard water, although cross tests with similar anomalies suggest redacted. Request: reading material with which to more easily pass the time. Granted. CPR-VAN-098. Subject appeared 3 miles off site. Had stayed in a local gym until containment operatives arrived. Subject materialized roughly 4 feet above the ground and fell into a muddled ground, spraining his ankle. Claims to have been at the bottom of a massive crater. After a couple of hours, the subject managed to crawl his way out of the crater to discover that he was in a world where time seemingly had stopped. He saw people and animals frozen in place. He saw birds frozen mid-flight in the sky, and the sun remained at the same point in the sky during his 4 days stay in reality. He found a working smartphone and found that the date was frozen at 02/07/2034. Subject explored the local town until he found a building 100 meters tall with a V logo and the word Vanguard in big green letters above the entrance. Inside, he found many individuals whose identities matched that of several Foundation staff. Requests? None. UE6-111-4A7. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was found attempting to return to the site, but with some difficulty. This was initially believed to stem from inebriation, but upon interviewing the subject, was determined to instead be due to infection caused by extended exposure to a non-stationary environment. So he's dizzy. It wasn't because he was drunk, it's because he was in a moving place constantly, and now he had to find his legs. It's kind of like when you have your sea legs and you get back onto land. It's really weird. Description: subject arrived in a populated area, experiencing what it perceived as at least a magnitude 7 earthquake. Despite this, subject noted its slight lack of infrastructure damage. Local inhabitants expressed confusion upon subject's attempts to question them about the unusual amount of tectonic activity. After 30 minutes, subject was approached by law enforcement and detained under suspicion of public intoxication due to its inability to stand or walk normally. The police station, subject learned that the current level of tectonic activity was considered normal in this universe. Almost all architecture was designed to incorporate a complex series of gyroscopes and gimbals that offset the constant motion it was subjected to. Subject was released after passing a breathalyzer test. Unable to contact a local Foundation equivalent and lacking sufficient funds for better accommodations, it eventually settled in a homeless encampment located in the city's central park, where it adjusted to the constant motion over several days. On day 47 of its shift, subject was awoken in the middle of the night. Although at first unable to identify what had awakened it besides a feeling of dizziness and nausea, subject quickly discovered that the shaking it had become accustomed to had entirely ceased. It was then further roused by the sound of screaming, sirens, and distant rumbling crashes and explosions. Upon exiting its tent, Subject discovered that the area had been impacted by a magnitude 0.00003 Earth still, which had leveled much of the city. With no counterbalancing tectonic activity, the massive gimbals, integral to the city, had ripped themselves from their foundations and destroyed the buildings they supported, crushing or trapping thousands of civilians under the rubble. Subject spent the remaining 9 days as part of a volunteer disaster response effort, attempting to extricate survivors from the ruins. Quest no. WR3-4GD-4H4. Retrieval uneventful. Description: Subject arrived in a dimension with a reverse day and night cycle and found it difficult to adapt for the first 2 days. No further unusual traits were noted until the subject came across a small village, which was populated entirely by what appeared to be human children. Children ranged from around 3 years old to roughly 10 years old and appeared to be in a constant state of panic. Children would attempt to avoid the subject and would shriek in fear if they were looked at. Subject eventually made its way to the center of this village, where it found an empty playground with a merry-go-round in the center. Upon moving closer to the merry-go-round, a child wearing a black hooded sweater appeared and began to watch the subject. Subject moved closer to the child, at which point the child began to back away, still staring at the subject through the eye holes of the hood. Subject followed the child around the village and eventually caught it up to it at the edge of the village. The child standing in front of a dark door, no apparent door handle. The child then backed through the door and the door closed behind it. Subject attempted to press its ear to the door, found it was too cold to touch. Requests none. 57V-OQ2-B70. Oh, B70, not B70, sorry. It's the letter O. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was found at the bottom of a large canyon in a state of severe malnutrition and dehydration. Description: Subject arrived in a dimension where it observed its own body with no apparent changes. Subject did not find any unusual changes until after it had eaten his first meal, which it reported as tasteless and bland. Subject also reported a severe increase in hunger after eating, since that it could eat multiple meals without any apparent change in hunger. This hunger increased exponentially over the course of a week. Subject refused to eat or drink the last 2 days before it shifted back. Requests a full course meal, granted after the subject had recovered from its malnutrition. So I believe this might actually get me in trouble, but I believe during literally the days after the Holocaust, the soldiers were told not to feed the prisoners, which were usually prisoners of war, the Jewish, the black, what am I saying? Anyone the Germans deemed different, which also included other Germans who they believed were Jewish, even though they weren't. There was no proof they were. But basically the survivors were told not to feed them anything because they were so emancipated and they were starving. So they had to be fed soup. They pretty much had to be fed soup and very soft food items, because if they ate too much, they may actually injure themselves or injure their stomachs. So they basically looked at these guys who were starving to death and they could do nothing for them except feed them soup when the guys came in hours later. And the reason we know this is because there are pictures, videos, and documentations of this. Now, for some reason, there are Holocaust deniers. I don't know why. The Germans literally bragged about doing this stuff. They have pictures of their own. And when you have all these people doing these different things, eventually your brain just goes, hey, malnutrition is really bad for the body. We should not be starving people at all. We shouldn't be harming them like this. But basically, after reading this, I actually read similar things from the American soldiers or the Russian soldiers who would come across these camps. They would be so brokenhearted because they couldn't feed them any food. They had to wait until supply lines came up with soup. That's heartbreaking to me. That you see someone starving near death and there is nothing you can do for them. That's sad. Anyway, Holocaust was bad, and the World War II German soldiers can suck it. And any modern people who worship those people can also suck it. You should not be worshiping those guys. They were morons. They were dumb. What am I? Oh, right. Sorry, I went off into a rant. N3R-RYX Game A5. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject arrived in a populated area in the Midwestern United States where Christmas decorations were put up on houses and buildings despite the date being in early September. Sounds familiar. Upon further investigation, the subject learned that most widely celebrated religious winter holidays were celebrated throughout the entire year in this reality. Throughout the duration of its stay, the subject observed that mostly Christian... Sorry about that. Observed mostly Christmas festivities and celebrations, likely due to the religious demographics of its location. Subject noted that this change had minimal impact on everyday life for most, but it did have some cultural impact, such as all music being holiday themed. Most popular songs were Christmas oriented, and people using holiday skewed variations of common phrases such as, "We'll wrap that gift when we get to it," and "You can give a reindeer a red nose, but you can't make it glow." Starting in the month of December, subject noted that the people were preparing for the winter holidays by taking down and seizing all holiday-oriented decorations and festivities. Subject noted that during this time, radio stopped playing holiday-oriented music and instead played music similar to what would normally be heard on the radio in baseline reality, which most people seem to have a strong distaste of. Approximately 3 months into its state, subject noticed that it was being followed by two men. Subject claims that one looked similar to Agent Redacted, a plainclothes agent who had previously helped retrieve the subject during the events of Entry 000-000-000. After being followed for 10 minutes, a red and green van with the markings Snow Cookies Presents. Oh, SCP, Snow Cookies Presents. Pulled up next to the subject. Subject shifted after multiple armored men with weapons stepped out of the van and approached it. Requests for all winter holiday-oriented decorations set up around the facility be taken down, as the subject shifted back on December. Redacted. Denied. RQ4-067-C5L. Retrieve subject in visiting St. Researcher A. Yick from Site 48 were found in Site 19 hallway in good physical condition. Description: it occurred as the subject was mid-fall after slipping on residue from SCP Redacted while roaming near its containment cell. S.R. Yick, who was still unaware of the finer points of local protocol, such as prohibition of physical contact after 2 weeks of previous shift, reached out to catch the subject and subsequently taken as well. The duo appeared in the underground ruins of indeterminate cultural origin. After explanations of situation and consequences of a similar previous incident, see Addendum 507-00 in primary file, S.R. Yick made sure to keep a physical grasp of the subject at all times from then on, even as they proceeded to begin taking detailed notes and recorded observations of the physical state, inscriptions, layout, and local artifacts. Valuable observations were collected, including potential implied context behind Redacted. As the duo continued in such activity for the next 13 hours until the return shift back occurred, to the express relief of subject and contrasting disappointment of S.R. Yick. Requests: mobile gaming device for any future long stretches in activity. Denied. Potential issues due to unnecessary electronic devices in unpredictable environments deemed unwarranted. Box of Lego bricks. Denied. Too bulky considering range of other approved items. Rubik's Cube. Approved. Keychain sized miniature version. I wonder how old this guy is. I mean, he shifts for months at a time. Is his like age slowed down, or do you think he just like he ages at the same rate no matter what? Because reading through this, it seems like he shifts for months at a time and then just jumps back a second later. Sometimes it's very weird. M1M-3W0-RLD. Retrieval. Subject manifested inside the first floor, Site 19, women's restroom. Startling guest researcher K, who subsequently struck the subject unconscious, believing subject to be a peeping Tom. Ouch. Description. Subject manifested in an alley and quickly discovered that nearly all color was replaced with shades of white, black, or gray. In addition, subject found sound could only be produced by speaking, and striking objects, snapping fingers, and other such activities made no noise. Subject exited the alley and found a city street filled with people, all dressed as mimes, communicating in an unknown form of sign language. Some individuals manifesting anomalous properties by appearing to pedal a bike or drive a car, and gliding at a high speed down the middle of the street. Subject attempted to ask passerby where it was, but all individuals suddenly clamped their hands over their ears and winced at the noise, with individuals appearing to ride bikes or drive cars suddenly falling to the ground, some being severely injured by their inertia, but did not cry out. After the cringing subsided, subject found all individuals staring at it with varying degrees of horror. Subject was shortly after handcuffed and apprehended by several headphone-wearing individuals, duct tape placed across his mouth, and taken to the third floor of a nearby building. One individual attempted to communicate in sign language with the subject, but eventually gave up and forcibly showed subject a handwritten note detailing the subject was an aberrant being capable of generating sounds in excess of a full decibel. A specialist team from the Aberrancy Security Vault would thus soon be here to take it to a facility suited to house it for the foreseeable future. Subject spent next hour attempting to learn sign language from scratch, following the individual's movements, but returned to this dimension right as several other headphone-wearing individuals appeared to take it to what it assumed was an alternate version of an SCP facility. Request sign language lessons. Granted. I actually think sign language should be taught in schools, because a lot of people are hearing impaired. So sign language would be a really good idea to teach in a curriculum. Of course, there are several issues, but at the same time, I would love to know sign language, even in high school. Taking a drink? Checking time on recording. 1 hour and 21 minutes, and we are almost done. Perfect. Let me reset it a little bit. There we go. K11-NFD-040. Retrieval. Subject displayed relatively diminished communication skills and vocabulary. Retrieval was otherwise uneventful. Description. Subject arrived in a location which is described as somewhere in Africa. Analysis of the recovered video footage revealed that the location in question closely resembled a replica of our universe's city of Kampala, with the primary exception being that the city's entire landscape was covered in wild plant life native to Central Africa, which is typical for cities which have been abandoned by the human populace for significant lengths of time. The subject soon discovered the city to be inhabited by an unusually dense population of greater and lesser apes, including chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, orangutans, and gibbons. I'm pretty sure orangutans are like in Asia, aren't they? So why are they in Africa? Anyway, continuing on. The inhabitants of the city displayed familiarity with guerrilla warfare and close quarters combat tactics, far greater than what is considered normal for anomalous non-human apes. A battalion consisting mainly of chimpanzees equipped with guns of various makes and types, bulletproof vests, army attire, and forest camouflage ambushed and restrained the subject, began preparing to ceremonially execute it. However, the battalion themselves were ambushed by an enemy battalion consisting of humans. The video footage was lost at this point. The subject recalls just barely avoiding dying in the battlefield during the ensuing conflict. The subject was taken as a prisoner of war by the apes and forcefully brought to a concentration camp, stripped of its belongings and incarcerated in a cage. Placed in an area containing many other detainees and mercilessly beaten upon attempting to communicate with one of its captors. Through watching news materials viewed by its captors, subject managed to learn that the universe it shifted to was a world dominated by sapient non-human apes as the superior species. Humans were also present in this reality, although they lacked sapience unlike their close relatives, the apes. Subject also learned that the Earth's counterpart of the universe K11 NFD-040 was experiencing a violent SK-class dominance shift scenario, perpetuated by the human populace which had achieved a higher level of intellect through unknown means, named the Great Human Revolution, or the Great Human Ape War, by the inhabitants of K11-NFD-040. By the time of the subject's arrival, the human-ape conflict had consumed well over 45% of Central Africa, and many important African cities such as Kampala. I'm going to butcher these names. I apologize in advance. I do really only speak English and some Spanish, so unfortunately, I do apologize. I'm not great with names. I'm sorry. It says here, Mabuji Mai and Bangwai. Bangwai? Mabuji Mai. Sounds right. I think it sounds right, but I'm also an English speaker. I don't speak any African languages. Yes, there are multiple African languages. If you did not know that, what are you doing? Anyway, continuing on. Had fallen under human administration. Subject was soon noted for its unusually developed motor abilities, which were considered extraordinarily advanced for a human. Subject's captors reacted with shock after discovering that the subject is sapient. The subject was successfully taught the language of the inhabitants of the universe, which faintly resembled a mix of Swahili and Dutch. Subject was offered to serve the ape armed forces in the ongoing war with humans, but was teleported back to our universe before it had a chance to deny the offer. Subject insists that if it actually had a chance to respond, it would turn the offer down as it finds its body to be grossly out of shape for armed conflict. Requests. Grammar lessons. Granted. Psychiatric treatment for subject's PTSD. Denied. The subject was not diagnosed with PTSD despite the traumatic nature of the experience. The next universe name is Do Not Enter. D0-N07-3N7ER. Sorry, 3R. Retrieval, uneventful. Description. Subject found itself in a reality where the landscape appeared barren, littered with remnants of advanced machinery and structures stretching across the horizon. Tall, multi-armed robots patrolling the area with precision, emitting low mechanical hums as they surveyed the surrounding. Subject cautiously maneuvered through the desolate landscape, utilizing cover to evade detection by the robot patrols. Subject took refuge behind what appeared to be a dormant manufacturing facility, where it discovered other humans hiding. The subject followed them into their hideout and gathered information about this situation. The Earth of Dimension D0-N07-3N73R had been colonized by an advanced extraterrestrial species known as the Xylots. Humanity, deemed inferior and subjugated by the Xylots, exists as a subservient race, subjected to the harsh conditions and strict governance under the Xylothian regime. The Xylots, possessing superior technology and intellect, established a totalitarian regime. Human society was divided into labor camps and controlled settlements. Xylothian technology dominates the planet. Massive structures of unknown materials loom over landscapes, serving as administrative centers and living quarters for the Xylots. Advanced surveillance systems monitor every human movement. Human population lives in fear and oppression, stripped of basic rights and the individual freedoms. Propaganda reinforces the belief in Xylothian superiority while suppressing any form of human resistance or rebellion. Human language and culture are systematically eroded, replaced by Xylothian directives and ideologies. Interactions between Xyloths and humans is minimal and strictly hierarchical. Humans are treated as disposable entities, subject to labor, exploitation, and harsh discipline. Sorry, I've been reading for over 3 hours now. Treated as disposable entities, subject to labor, exploitation, and harsh disciplinary measures. Any attempt at resistance is met with swift and severe punishment, often resulting in public executions or cruel experimentation. Despite the overwhelming control imposed by the Xyloths, small underground resistance groups persist, clandestinely organizing and planning acts of defiance. However, these movements face constant surveillance and infiltration by Xylothian informants, leading to frequent dismantling of their operations. Requests not. This one is the Infinity IKEA. 1N-FIN-173-1K34. Retrieval via tracking device. Description: subject found itself within what it described as an infinite furniture store, a space whose dimensions defied conventional measurement. The vast expanse of these stores extended endlessly, comprising shelves, alcoves, and corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. Each aisle showcased a myriad of furniture pieces, ranging from antique chairs to modern couches arranged in repetitive yet seemingly boundless patterns. Upon further exploration, the subject discovered a cafeteria within the labyrinthian store that exclusively served freshly made meatballs, emitting a tantalizing aroma. However, the lack of any identifiable source for the meatballs raised a disconcerting uncertainty. Despite this, the individual consumed them as its sole sustenance throughout its shift. Midway through its shift, the subject encountered a humanoid figure devoid of any discernible facial features, its form distorted and disfigured. The faceless entity, assumed to be wearing a staff uniform, moved silently, gliding through the aisles, arranging and repositioning furniture. Despite the absence of a visible countenance. The entity appeared to be aware of the subject's presence, occasionally turning its featureless head in the subject's direction. After an elapsed period of approximately 6 hours, a sudden blackout engulfed the store. Numerous staff members, each lacking a discernible facial features, commenced a rapid sprint towards the subject. These faceless figures emitted a unsettling and incomprehensible sound from their featureless heads. The subject, unable to comprehend or recall the nature of these utterances, described it as an unknown language. Filled with panic, subject fled the scene in an urgent attempt to ensure its safety before shifting back. Request: amnestic treatment denied. Meatballs granted. K21-N07-F21. Retrieval. Subject manifested inside the first floor of Site 19 women's bathroom, mid-swing, and subsequently struck guest researcher K unconscious. Sorry about that, everyone. We will be continuing on. Retrieval. Subject manifested in... let me just restart. K21-N07-F21. Retrieval. Subject manifested inside the first floor Site 19 women's bathroom, mid-swing, and subsequently struck guest researcher K unconscious. Description. Subject appeared in a wooden complex of a Chinese aesthetic, with dozens of small rooms for various purposes, such as sleeping and cooking. As the subject moved the complex, it found a courtyard where several humans were training by repeating anomalous feats of strength endurance, and speed at the direction of a humanoid composed of liquid metal with a droplet-shaped head, referred to by the subject as Sick Master Guru with two O's. Guru? Master Guru. The humanoid was alarmed at subject's presence and threatened subject, assuming it to be an intruder, but accepted subject's explanation of its anomalous properties, citing this universe's equivalent of the subject being its people, though currently in the middle of its own shift. To stay in the complex, subject was tasked with chores by the metallic humanoid, though a majority of the other individuals in the complex took offense to subject's easy entrance to the complex, which was supposedly high in the mountains. After a week, subject asked to join in training to alleviate its boredom, and was permitted to begin by the metallic humanoid. Though physiological differences between humans from this universe and the baseline universe forced subject to remain at early stages of training throughout its stay. After another 2 or 3 days, subject demonstrated elevated levels of stamina and strength akin to a high-tier athlete from the baseline universe, cited by the metallic humanoid as due to a higher density of nutrients in this universe's food. In the final day of its shift, subject mentioned that a fox-like humanoid with several tails entered the complex along with several other humans, having come from a rival complex across the mountain to challenge the metallic humanoids. Each of the rival group's humans was paired with one from the metallic humanoids to perform a non-lethal duel, with the victorious complex being one who won at least 7 or 13 duels, with the subject being pitted against the smallest and youngest, but fiercest member of the rival group, in the absence of its counterpart. Though several humans in the metallic humanoid's grip lost, subject won its duel and barely eked out the 7th victory for the metallic humanoid's complex. As a reward for its victory, a party was held by the metallic humanoid and its human pupils, who now respected subject. At the end of the party, subject noted its counterpart had shifted back to this universe and proposed a duel, but to its distress, shifted back to baseline universe in the middle of its first punch. Requests: clothing worn during shift back, denied. Article sent for testing. Training dummy or sandbag for its room, denied. Martial arts lessons, granted. More exercise in its routine, granted. G01-M09-N07. Retrieval uneventful. Subject manifested on a large green plane, where everything, including the subject, appeared to be a cell-shaded form. Subject noted its proportions were significantly altered to be stocky and short, with large eyes and a round nose. Subject attempted to jump over a nearby ledge. It did so at least 3 times its own height and landed safely, to its surprise. After an hour of crossing plains and evading being detected by several non-humanoid entities, it came to an area where cubes composed of bricks were suspended in the air and a humanoid in redacted, presumably native to the environment, was breaking the cubes by jumping on them and punching them from below. Subject followed the individual for a short time, intended to ask where it was, before everything, including the subject and the humanoid, became frozen for several minutes. Subject shifted back before anything else could occur. Addendum: during subject shift, Agent A redacted, who was playing redacted, in the Site 19 break room, discovered an anomalous glitch in the game where an entity, similar to the description of the subject's description of itself during its shift, appeared in the middle of a level and followed the player character, redacted. Agent A, unsure of what to do, paused the game and, at the direction of case researcher K several minutes later, shut the system off. Analysis of the moment in which Agent A redacted shut off the game and revealed the entity resembling subject to disappear 0.73 seconds before the screen turned black and 0.0001 seconds before subject shifted back to baseline reality. Requests? None. They almost killed this guy. But sounds like a Mario. B15-IO3-E19. Retrieval. Subject shifted back with nearly fatal lacerations around the neck, resembling tooth marks from a large predatory animal. Description. Subject manifested in a dark cave and heard dripping water nearby. The subject turned on its flashlight. Found the cave walls were made of flesh. Drops of reddish fluid that smelled like blood fell from white, thing-like stalactites over her head. Unnerved, subject proceeded in the direction that seemed to lead up to the surface. As it did so, subject heard a human voice from deeper in the cave behind itself, which asked various questions of odd natures, but did not appear to understand or respond to subject's own. Subject continued to ascend, increasing in pace as the voice got closer and other voices began to join in asking. Subject threateningly fired off a warning shot into the cavern below, which caused the voices to stop, but as the subject turned to continue upwards, it came face to face with an eyeless, red-skinned creature with elongated jaws, which spoke in subject's voice to ask, "What makes you think you can get out this way?" Subject shifted back as the creature lunged to bite at subject's throat. Requests? None. C15, L15, and 25. Retrieval. Subject returned covered in minuscule buildings and anomalous small humanoids, proportionally 1/200 the size of the baseline reality humans. Buildings and humanoids collected and relocated to Site Redacted and classified as SCP Redacted. Escape instances of SCP Redacted-1 assumed dead due to Site-19 decontamination protocols. Description. Subject manifested on a large ditch and noted that the skies seemed to flicker between bright and dark about once per second. On closer inspection of the ground, what was thought to be grass was instead minuscule trees, the tallest of which being only 5 inches or so tall. The subject stood up and noted its head felt cool, and the edges of the ditch were bare stone with snowy caps, resembling mountain ranges. Subject sat and planned for roughly 1.5 minutes before it felt an itch on its leg. Noticing the sensation was caused by a group of minuscule humans less than a quarter of a centimeter tall each, moving like they were on super fast forward, and erecting simple wooden houses. Subject observed the humanoids and noted their rapid improvement of structures using material from the ground around the subject's leg, developing multi-story buildings after only 30 seconds. After a minute, subject attempted to relocate the humanoids to the ground by delicately placing their buildings on the ground, but this seemed to push the humanoids to settle on subject shoulders and head instead. Subject, as the last resort to drive the humanoids to go elsewhere, stood up and put its head and shoulders in the cool area, but the humanoids developed more well-insulated houses and harnessed fire. Subject traveled through the ditch to a more open area, hoping to find a more suitable place in its own body for the humanoids to inhabit, but the humanoids did not leave. Roughly 10 minutes later, subject had walked a great distance, singing to itself to stave off boredom, and its chest and back were both covered in hanging wooden houses, while castle-like stone buildings covered its head and shoulders. At this time, subject felt a sharp pang on its wrist and lifted it, noting the humans had camped there and the time it had taken to raise its hands. The humanoids then produced words in English, stating they had spent 2 years translating subject's language and asked it to share wisdom for them. Subject stated that it had been looking for a place to leave the humanoids, but the humanoids refused to leave, describing subject's body as holy land. Intrigued, subject decided to ask about the humanoids' history and beliefs. History and religion details in SCP Redacted file. Afterwards, subject gave in and told the humanoids its name was Grabnock the Destroyer, prompting the humanoids to rename their colony to Grabnock Colony. Several minutes later, after crossing a small plain and a waist-deep saltwater lake described by the humanoids as a large sea, subject shifted back to baseline reality. Occasional visits to the people of Grabnock Colony, SCP Redacted. Pending approval. Almost done with this. Sorry, guys. It is a long video, but also pretty interesting. H05-A22-E14. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject manifested in a breathable zero-G environment containing wisps of golden mist and brightly illuminated from an unknown light source. Subject found it could move through the environment by swimming. Did so for several minutes, looking for any solid object that might be used as a landmark. Subject noted a feeling of being watched at some point and turned to see two small white life forms resembling winged keyhole shapes, with only two small black dots for eyes and a small mouth, observing it from behind a bank of mists. Subject attempted to communicate with them, but the life forms did not recognize subject's verbal or sign languages, responding with high-pitched musical-sounding vocalizations. Several other life forms appeared, and one capable of speaking English asked the subject what it was doing here. Subject explained its anomalous properties, but the life forms only seemed to become more uneasy. The life forms had asked earlier explained that other universes' instances of the subject had arrived in this universe before. Each time the universal force that punched them through into this one would allow a part of the ancestral enemy in. Almost immediately, subject and life forms noticed a black mass similar to a fracture, the golden mist appearing in the distance. Estimations from the subject's description puts the size of the mass as about 1 kilometer in width and 3 kilometers from subject's location upon first sighting it, though it seemed to grow larger over the course of a minute. The life forms around the subject immediately bowed their heads and began chanting, and the subject looked up to see motes of light floating from the life forms to a particularly dense mass of golden mist above them, where the unknown light source seemed to originate. The light source suddenly brightened, and the subject looked away towards the growing black mass before a stream of golden energy lanced out from the unknown light source into the black mass. The illumination provided by the golden stream revealed the mass to act like a hole, through which several entities around an immense red-skinned humanoid with large horns could be seen. Viewing the central humanoid induced a cognito-hazardous effect in the subject, causing a severe headache and a sudden surge in sadistic impulses. Before subject could act upon these impulses, the golden stream was joined by several others, blocking subject's view of the humanoid, before a single far thicker stream struck the black mass center and destroyed it, leaving only golden mist behind. Subject only remembered turning to look at the light source, now obscured by the mist, one more time before shifting back. Subject appeared to be dazed for several seconds upon shifting back, but became lucid with minimal interaction. Subject can only describe the light source as, it thinks it saw God. Requests to ask SCP-343 if what subject saw was SCP-343 or not. Denied. Addendum 507-3B-00. Due to a particularly trying encounter with Redacted, several documents in the archives have been altered, corrupted, or technically never existed. Document 507-3B appears to have been affected by this, and is currently being rebuilt using backup files, references, and redacted, respectively. Subject matter may occasionally increase, decrease, or undergo modifications in light of this. Dr. Redacted. So, that'll be the last of this, because my throat really hurts. I'm kind of sick of reading it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this two-part series. I will probably cut out the parts where it was officially, where I took a break, because that was over like 10 minutes long. So, you'll probably see that cut out and made it a little shorter. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Even if you didn't, that's perfectly fine. We all have our different opinions on everything. But yeah, I'll catch you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace.